Let's start on the top of the camera with the power switch. Now to turn the camera on, I just rotate the switch to the on position, and it's ready and waiting by the time I can put my eye to the viewfinder. Now at times you may want to illuminate the LCD control panel so that you can see it better in low light, and you can do that by rotating the power switch a little further, and it will light up for a few seconds. The control panel shows you a lot of information about the current camera settings. In fact, there are about 24 different camera settings that can appear at various times on the control panel, including the flash mode, the battery condition, shutter speed, f-stop, the release mode, the remaining capacity of the memory card, the metering mode, the autofocus mode, the selected focus area, image size, image quality, and the white balance setting. Learning to understand what all of this information means and then how to change the camera settings represented on the display will be very important to the quality of the pictures you take. We'll be learning a lot more about all of these settings throughout the rest of the DVD. Nested inside the power switch is the shutter release button. Pressing it halfway down will activate the autofocus and auto exposure functions so that the camera can start making its calculations for taking the best picture. Fully depressing the shutter release button momentarily will fire the shutter once, and holding it down while the camera is set in continuous shooting mode will fire up to 4.5 frames per second. Now that's fast. Next to the shutter release button is the metering mode button for determining how the camera calculates the exposure for each picture, and the exposure compensation button that can be used to override the automatic exposure settings. To use either control, you just press the button down while you turn the main command dial at the rear of the camera to cycle through the choices. Next, there's the release mode button. There are 6 release mode choices on the D90 that control what the camera does when you press the shutter button. Most of the time, you'll want the camera to take just one picture only, but sometimes you'll want it to fire off several pictures in a row. Or maybe you'll want to use the self-timer so you can run over and get into the picture yourself. Changing the release mode is accomplished the same way that other camera settings are changed. You just hold the button down while you rotate the main command dial. The choices are single frame. This is the mode you'll use most often. The camera takes one photo each time the shutter release button is pressed. Continuous low speed. The camera will record from 1 to 4 frames per second, depending on how you've programmed its menu setting, while you hold down the shutter release button. The default speed is 3 frames per second. Continuous high speed. The camera will record up to 4.5 frames per second until you release the shutter button. Self-timer. Using the timer with the camera mounted on a tripod delays taking the picture by several seconds after you press the shutter button. The default length of the delay is 10 seconds, but it can easily be changed to 2 seconds, 5 seconds, or 20 seconds by changing the appropriate menu setting. Now 10 seconds is good if you want to go over and get into the picture, but a 2-second delay is often used while shooting at slow shutter speeds to give the camera a chance to settle down after you press the shutter button, thus preventing blurry images. The final 2 release modes are delayed remote and quick response remote. Both of these require the use of an optional remote control for releasing the shutter without even touching the camera. Over on the other side of the camera is the mode dial for selecting the camera's shooting mode. Now the D90 has 11 different shooting modes that determine how the camera calculates the exposure, fires the flash, processes the image before saving it to the memory card, and even how the autofocus system works. The shooting modes range in complexity from fully automatic, where the camera controls everything, all the way to fully manual, where you have to do all the work yourself. In fact, they can be divided up into 2 groups: the advanced modes and the point and shoot modes. The particular mode that you choose to use at any given time will depend on what you're shooting and how comfortable you are with changing some of the camera's settings yourself. But choosing the best mode for any given situation will make all the difference in how your pictures turn out. On the front of the D90, you'll find a number of other controls. Starting at the upper left corner, there's the sub-command dial, not to be confused with the main command dial we saw on the rear of the camera. The sub-command dial's main purpose is to set the aperture of the lens when you're shooting in the manual exposure mode. Moving over to the other side of the lens, this switch is the focus mode selector, and it offers two choices: manual focus or autofocus. Next is the lens release button. One of the great things about having an SLR is the ability to change lenses to suit different shooting situations. To remove a lens from the camera, make sure the camera is turned off. Then press down on the button, turn the lens clockwise, and take it off. Now to mount a lens on the camera, again, make sure the power is turned off. Align the index marks, slide the lens firmly into the mount, then rotate it counterclockwise until you hear it lock into place. Next is the bracketing button, which is used to turn on and off bracketing. Bracketing is an advanced feature that makes it easy to capture multiple images of the same scene with slightly different exposure or white balance settings, and then later on you can choose which one of them looks best. Just above the bracket button is the flash mode button, which is used to control how the flash functions. And in some shooting modes, it will also release the built-in flash and activate it for shooting. On the left side of the camera, under these two rubber covers, you'll find 5 jacks for connecting the D90 to other equipment. The first jack is for attaching Nikon's optional GPS receiver so that latitude, longitude, altitude, and time data are saved with each image's metadata. The next jack is for connecting your D90 to a television monitor with the supplied AV cable. That way you can view your pictures on a TV instead of the LCD. However, the HDMI port allows you to view your photos on a high-definition monitor for dramatically better picture quality. The required HDMI cable isn't included, but if you have an HD TV, get a cable for the camera. You'll be amazed at how great your photos look on a big screen. Next, there's a standard USB port for connecting the camera to a computer or even directly to a printer. And finally, there's a port for connecting an optional AC adapter that is sold separately. On the back side of the camera, you'll find the greatest number of dials, buttons, switches, and other controls. It might look complicated at first, but don't worry. Once you've learned the basic layout, you'll be able to change any setting you want quickly and easily. The most dominant feature on the rear of the camera is the impressive 3-inch LCD monitor. And just above that is the viewfinder, which is clear, bright, and a pleasure to use. In fact, one of the best things about taking pictures with an SLR instead of a point-and-shoot camera is having a high-quality optical viewfinder. There's a full array of status information shown in the viewfinder, including the focus points, the in-focus indicator, shutter speed, aperture, and the remaining capacity of the memory card. Before you start shooting, you need to take a second to focus the viewfinder optics to suit your own eyesight. You can do that by turning the diopter adjustment dial until the data displayed in the viewfinder appears sharp. Next to the diopter adjustment control is the auto exposure lock, auto focus lock button. We've already talked about the main command dial, so let's jump down to the live view button. Live View enables you to display a real-time video image on the LCD monitor instead of using the normal viewfinder to take your pictures. In fact, you can even use the Live View mode to record home movies with the D90 instead of still photographs. To turn Live View on, you just press the button and it's ready to go. But note that now the regular viewfinder is blacked out, and can't be used at all while live view is turned on. To take a picture, you just press the shutter button like you normally would. Now to get out of the live view mode and go back to using the viewfinder, simply press the live view button again. Next, there's the multi-selector switch that functions kind of like a joystick for navigating through the menus, viewing the images that are stored on the memory card, and also for controlling which of the focus points are selected in the viewfinder. I'll usually refer to these controls during the rest of the DVD as the 4 arrow buttons. The OK button is pretty self-explanatory. Anytime you want to make a selection from the menus, you just press the OK button. It's also used as the record start stop button when you're shooting movies, but we'll talk about that later. Next is the focus selector lock switch. Rotating it to the L position will prevent the selected focus point from changing if the multi-selector is accidentally pressed. I recommend that you leave this unlocked. Next, there's the information display button, which can be pressed to bring up a shooting information screen that shows almost 36 different camera settings, including the shutter speed, aperture, the number of exposures remaining, and much more. Now, a lot of this data is also shown on the control panel and in the viewfinder. But sometimes, such as when the camera is on a tripod like this, it's a lot easier to see the settings displayed on the monitor instead. But that's not all this button does. Watch what happens when the Info button is pressed a second time. Now several of the settings along the bottom of the screen can be highlighted and then changed without drilling down into the menu screens. This shortcut can be a big time saver. To turn off the information display, you can either wait 10 seconds and the camera will do it for you, or you can press the Info button a third time. Over on the left side of the monitor, there are 6 additional buttons that have multiple functions each. There's the Delete button, the Playback button, the Menu button, the Protect button, the Thumbnail button, and the Playback Zoom In button. These all work closely with each other, so it makes sense to talk about them all at once. Both photographs and movies can be viewed on the monitor at any time by pressing the Playback button. This view is called the File Information Display. The most recently taken image or the last one you viewed is shown first. You can view other images stored on the memory card by using the left and right arrow buttons on the multi-selector to go backwards or forwards. You can always tell which image you're looking at by noting the numbers that are displayed in the upper right-hand corner. The number to the left of the slash tells you the number of the current image, and the number to the right of the slash tells you how many images are stored on the card. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the folder where the image is stored, the file name, the image quality, the image size, the time of day, and the date it was taken. To view additional information, you can press either the up or down arrow buttons to switch to the Overview Data display. Now we've added the exposure mode, the shutter speed, the aperture of the lens, a histogram, and other information. Whenever you're playing back images, they can be viewed individually as seen here, or as thumbnails by pressing the Thumbnail button. You can choose to show 4 images per page, 9 images, 72 images, or even use the new calendar display to easily find photos organized by the day they were taken. Let's use the Playback Zoom In button to go back to the thumbnail page that shows 4 images. Notice that each photo is individually numbered, and a bar on the right side of the screen tells you approximately where you are in relation to the rest of the photos stored on the card. Any thumbnail image with film sprocket holes along the sides is a movie file. When you find a photo that you want to view full screen, just press the OK button to exit the thumbnail view. And if full screen view isn't good enough to see the details, for example, if you wanted to check to see if an image was in focus, you can press the playback zoom in button repeatedly to magnify the image. You can scroll around to see other parts of the photo by using the arrow buttons. To decrease the magnification, press the thumbnail button to zoom back out, or just press the OK button at any time to immediately return to the normal full screen view. Now, if you're like me, sometimes you'll be able to tell right away that a photo you took is no good. So why not just get rid of it and free up some space on the memory card? You can do that with the delete button. Whenever there's a photo displayed on the monitor that you don't want to keep, you can press the delete button and a confirmation screen will appear. Press the delete button again to confirm the deletion and the picture is gone, so be careful. However, for just the opposite situation, if you've got an important image on the memory card that you want to prevent from being deleted, press the protect button. Whenever you see the key icon overlaid on any picture, that means it's locked and can't be deleted. Unless, of course, you reformat the entire memory card. To unprotect an image, just press the delete button again. Even though the D90 has a couple of dozen external buttons, switches, and knobs, many of the camera's most important functions can only be accessed via the menu screens. And those are displayed on the monitor by pressing the menu button. The color-coded display with intuitive descriptions facilitates easy viewing and speedy navigation. By the end of this DVD, you should have no problem navigating the menus and making changes. Now, you may have noticed that 3 of the buttons in this area of the camera also have labels written above them. That's because they aren't just used for playback functions, they are also used to change important camera settings while you're shooting. By pressing the WB button and turning the main command dial, you can change the white balance setting. To change the ISO setting, just hold down the button and turn the main command dial. The same thing goes for image quality and image size. To change the image quality, hold the button down and rotate the main command dial. Or to change the image size, rotate the sub-command dial on the front of the camera. Now, on this side of the camera, you'll find the slot for the memory card. The door is opened by sliding it back, but you should always make sure the camera is turned off before inserting or ejecting a card. If you forget, chances are nothing bad will happen, but it's just good practice to turn the power off before removing either the memory card, the battery, or the lens. Now, the D90 uses secure digital memory cards for storage, and pressing on the card briefly will eject it. Memory cards must be formatted before they can be used for the first time, and then later on, whenever you want to completely erase all of the images on the card and start shooting with a clean slate. I recommend that you reformat your memory cards every time you load them into your camera, assuming, of course, that you've already transferred all the images stored on the card to your computer for safekeeping. Please note that formatting a memory card will erase all files on the card, including any photos that have been protected. Formatting a card is very easy and takes just a couple of seconds. Start by pressing the menu button, and then go to the Setup menu page and choose Format Memory Card. Answer yes, and the formatting will be completed in a few seconds or less.